The truck needed an expert gringo until an unemployed mechanic fixed it in just one day. The midday sun beat down relentlessly on the Hermanos Vega auto repair shop on the outskirts of Guadalajara. Don Roberto Vega, a 62-year-old man with hands weathered by 40 years of work, looked with frustration at the cargo truck that had been the pride of his business. Now he was just a useless metal monument taking up prime space in the shop. This is the third time the specialist from the city has come away empty-handed, Roberto muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a worn handkerchief. I don't know what else to do. His nephew Miguel, a 28-year-old who had inherited the business with him after his father's death, approached with 2 glasses of hibiscus tea. Uncle, the bank called again, if we don't deliver those parts to Monterrey by Friday, we lose the contract. And without that contract, I know, son, I know perfectly well. Roberto interrupted, taking the glass with trembling hands. That truck is our only way to transport large cargo. The other vehicles can't handle that weight. The problem had started 3 weeks ago. The 2015 Kenworth truck, which had been the workshop's biggest investment, simply stopped starting. The engine turned over. It made noise, but it wouldn't start. They had called all the mechanics they knew in the area. No one could diagnose the problem accurately. The electrical system is fine, said the first. The fuel pump works perfectly, said the second. You need a certified specialist from the United States, said the third, the most expensive of all. This model has very sophisticated computers. Here in Mexico, we don't have the right equipment. That last sentence had been like a dagger to Roberto. All his life, he had repaired every vehicle that came into his shop, from old tractors to modern cars. But this truck had defeated him. And how much does that gringo charge? Miguel asked. Even though he already knew it, he wouldn't like the answer. 1,000 pesos, just to come and check it out, with no guarantee that he'll fix it, Roberto replied, letting out a long, heavy sigh. And if he has to order parts from there, we could be talking about 200,000 or more. Miguel did the math in his head. The workshop barely made 30,000 pesos a month after paying salaries, rent, and materials. They were trapped. Without the truck, they couldn't fulfill the contract. Without the contract, they wouldn't have the money to pay the specialist. And without the specialist, the truck would remain useless. We could ask for a loan, Miguel suggested without much conviction. We're already 2 months behind on rent, son. Who's going to lend us money? Silence fell between them, interrupted only by the distant sound of traffic on the main avenue and the metallic clanging of Joaquin, their only remaining employee, working on an old suru at the back of the workshop. The workshop door creaked as it opened. They both turned, expecting to see a customer, but instead a man of about 35 entered, thin, wearing worn but clean clothes and a sports backpack slung over his shoulder. His face showed fatigue, but his eyes had a gleam of determination. Good afternoon, the man greeted them in a clear voice. Sorry to bother you. I saw your ad in the window saying you were looking for temporary help. Roberto and Miguel exchanged confused glances. What ad? Miguel asked. The one in the front window. Says temporary mechanic wanted. The man pointed toward the entrance. Miguel walked quickly to the front, and sure enough, taped to the dusty glass, was a yellowed piece of paper that had been there for months, from when they still had enough work to need extra help. Ah, that one, Miguel went back inside. Look, the situation is different now. We don't really have much work at the moment. The man nodded but didn't move. I understand. My name is Tomas Ruiz. I am a mechanic specializing in diesel engines and electronic systems for cargo trucks. I worked for 8 years at a transportation company in Querétaro until they closed down 2 months ago. I've been looking for work ever since. Roberto felt a spark of interest, but quickly extinguished it. They had already been through many disappointments. Look, young man, we appreciate you coming, but that Kenworth over there, Tomas interrupted, pointing to the truck. How long has it been out of service? 3 weeks, Miguel replied. Wait, because I saw fresh oil underneath, which means they've been trying to fix it recently. Tomas walked toward the truck without asking permission, with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. May I? Without waiting for an answer, he approached the vehicle and began to inspect it with precise, experienced movements. Roberto and Miguel looked at each other again, this time with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. 3 certified mechanics have already been here, Roberto warned. They all said we need a specialist from the United States. Tomas didn't respond immediately. He crouched down under the chassis, looked at something closely, then opened the hood and examined the engine for several minutes. He took a small flashlight and a basic multimeter out of his backpack. "Can I get in the cab?" he finally asked. "Go ahead," Miguel said, crossing his arms. Tomas climbed into the truck, turned the key, and listened carefully to the sound of the engine trying to start. He repeated the process 3 times, each time paying attention to different details. He climbed down and inspected under the hood again. After 10 minutes, he stood up and wiped his hands on a rag he took out of his backpack. "I think I know what the problem is," he said in a calm but confident voice. Roberto felt his heart race, but he didn't want to get his hopes up. Everyone else had said the same thing, and none of them had been able to fix it. "It's the crankshaft position sensor," Tomas explained. "It's sending the wrong signals to the computer. That's why the engine turns but doesn't start. The computer doesn't know when to inject the fuel." Miguel frowned. The second mechanic checked all the sensors. He said they were fine. He probably checked with a basic scanner, and the sensor passes the standard test, Tomas replied. But under thermal load, it fails intermittently. It's a common problem in these 2015 Kenworths. I saw it dozens of times in my old job. Roberto felt a mixture of hope and fear. What if this young man was right, and after 3 weeks of anguish, the solution was something so simple and he could fix it? He asked in a barely audible voice. Tomas nodded. "I need to get the right sensor. It's not just any generic sensor. It has to be the specific OEM for this model, and I need to check some wires in the harness that might be damaged. If you give me full access to the truck and get me the sensor, I can have it running by noon tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Miguel almost shouted. The specialist said it would take weeks because they want to justify their fees. Tomas smiled for the first time, a tired but genuine smile. "Look, I understand your skepticism. You've been through this before, but I really need to work, and you need that truck running. Make me an offer. Don't pay me anything up front. If the truck isn't running perfectly by noon tomorrow, you don't owe me a dime. But if it works, pay me what's fair for the job." Roberto looked at his nephew. Miguel shrugged with an expression that said, "What do we have to lose? How much would you charge?" Roberto asked. "3,000 for the labor. You pay for the sensor." It was less than what other mechanics charged just to diagnose the problem. "And where do we get that sensor?" Miguel asked. "There's a parts store on Lázaro Cárdenas Avenue near the food market. It's called Autopartes del Bajío. Ask for Don Julio and tell him Tomas Ruiz from the Gutierrez Transport Company sent you. He has the right OEM sensors. It will cost around $2,500. Roberto did some quick calculations. Total cost versus $50,000 just for the Gringo specialist visit. And if it didn't work, they wouldn't lose anything except the price of the sensor, which they would need anyway. "All right," Roberto said, extending his hand. "It's a deal, young Tomas." Tomas shook his hand firmly. "I won't let you down, Don Roberto. I promise." As Miguel ran off to the auto parts store before it closed, Roberto watched Tomas prepare his tools with methodical, professional movements. For the first time in 3 weeks, he felt something like hope. Evening was falling on Guadalajara when Miguel returned with the sensor in a plastic bag. It had been more expensive than expected, 200 pesos. But Don Julio had guaranteed that it was the correct part, original from the factory. "Here it is," Miguel said, handing the bag to Tomas. "Don Julio asked about you. He says you owe him a visit." Tomas smiled as he took the sensor out of its packaging and examined it carefully. "Don Julio got me a job when no one else would. I owe him much more than a visit." Roberto, who had been watching from his small office, came out with 3 sandwiches wrapped in aluminum foil so they could work on a full stomach. He said, handing out the sandwiches. "My wife made them, tortas ahogadas, just the way they should be." Tomas accepted one with obvious gratitude on his face. It was clear that he hadn't eaten well in a long time. "Thank you very much, Don Roberto. You didn't have to bother." "It's no bother, son. Joaquin, come and eat." Roberto called to the employee who was still working in the back. The 4 men sat on upturned spare parts boxes, eating in silence for a few minutes. The spicy taste of the tomato sauce mixed with vinegar was exactly what they needed after a long, hot day. Tell me, Tomas, Roberto said after a while. How is it that a mechanic with your experience has been out of work for 2 months? Tomas finished chewing before answering, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin. The company I worked for, Transportes Gutierrez, was a family business, 3 generations. They had 22 trucks, and I was the maintenance manager, but the owner's eldest son got into bad business. He took out loans using the trucks as collateral. When he couldn't pay, the bank took everything. Overnight, 15 of us were out of work. What about your family? Miguel asked. I live alone. My mom is in Michoacan. I send her money when I can. Tomas paused. I was married, but it ended 3 years ago. She wanted me to work in something more stable with fixed hours. I spent many nights fixing trucks so they could leave on time on their roads. In the end, she chose to find someone who would be more present. Roberto nodded understandingly. He knew that story. How many relationships had broken up because of the demands of keeping a business afloat? And why Guadalajara? Asked Joaquin, who had been quiet until then. I've been traveling to different cities looking for work, explained Tomas. Querétaro, León, Aguascalientes. I arrived in Guadalajara a week ago. It's the last city before returning to Michoacan with my mom, something I'd rather avoid. She's 70 years old and has enough health problems of her own without having to support me too. There are a lot of auto repair shops here in Guadalajara, Miguel commented. Have you tried other places? I've left my resume at 22 shops, Tomas replied, and there was resignation in his voice. The problem is that they all want to see local experience, references from Guadalajara specifically. Besides, many are already fully staffed, and the big shops only hire on recommendation. Roberto felt a pang of empathy. He had started his shop 40 years ago in exactly the same situation, with no contacts, no local references, just his hands and his knowledge. The world is changing, son, said Roberto. Before, a good mechanic could find work anywhere. Now it's all paperwork, certifications, recommendations, as if skilled hands didn't speak for themselves. Exactly, Tomas nodded. I have certifications, but they're from Querétaro. Here in Jalisco, they want me to get recertified, and that costs money and time that I don't have. Miguel looked at his uncle. They both knew what it was like to fight against a system that favored the big over the small, those with paupers over those with skill. They finished eating, and Tomas stood up, ready to work. Well, enough talk. I have a truck to fix. Roberto got up too. Do you need help? If Miguel can assist me with the lamp while I work under the truck, that would be perfect, Tomas replied. And if Joaquin can continue with his usual work, all the better. I don't want to interrupt the normal flow of the workshop. For the next 3 hours, Tomas worked with absolute concentration. First, he disconnected the battery and began tracing every wire in the electrical harness connected to the crankshaft sensor. Miguel held the lamp while Tomas, lying on a piece of cardboard under the truck, inspected each connection. Here it is, Tomas said after a while. Look at this, Miguel. Miguel crouched down to see. Tomas was pointing to a wire whose plastic cover was slightly melted near a part of the engine that generated a lot of heat. See how the insulation is? Tomas explained. This wire runs very close to the exhaust manifold. Over time, the heat melted the cover and is causing an intermittent short circuit. That's why the sensor works when it's cold but fails when the engine gets hot. The other mechanics didn't see that. Miguel was genuinely impressed because they didn't know exactly what to look for. Tomas climbed out from under the truck. When you know the history of problems with these specific models, you know where to look first. Tomas went to his backpack and took out a roll of high-temperature thermal tape and splicing tools. I need to repair this cable properly. It's not just a matter of putting on tape, and that's it. It has to be done right or the problem will come back in a few weeks. He worked for another hour repairing the wiring, insulating each connection with surgical precision. Roberto, who was watching from a distance, recognized the mark of a true craftsman. He wasn't just someone who knew mechanics. He was someone who respected his craft. When he finished with the wiring, Tomas installed the new sensor with extreme care, applying exactly the right amount of torque to each screw, checking each electrical connection. Done, he said. Finally, now we have to reconnect the battery and run some tests. It was almost 8 p.m. The workshop was lit only by the work lamps, and the sky had taken on that purple hue characteristic of Guadalajara at dusk. "It's very late," said Roberto. "Why don't we leave the test for tomorrow?" "With all due respect, Don Roberto, I prefer to test it now," replied Tomas. "If there are any additional problems, I want to know about them tonight so I can work on them first thing tomorrow morning. I don't want to waste your time or mine." Roberto nodded, admiring the young man's work ethic. Tomas reconnected the battery and climbed into the truck's cab. Roberto, Miguel, and Joaquin gathered around, holding their breath. Tomas turned the key. The engine turned once, twice, and stopped. Roberto felt his stomach sink. Tomas frowned thoughtfully, climbed out of the truck, and reopened the hood, checking each connection with his multimeter. "No oil pressure," he muttered. "After so long without running, the pump needs priming." He made some adjustments, checked the fluid levels, and climbed back in. This time, when he turned the key, the engine started on the first try. The roar of the diesel filled the workshop like heavenly music. The engine ran perfectly, smooth and powerful, without the slightest hesitation. Miguel let out a cry of joy and hugged his uncle. Joaquin applauded. Roberto felt his eyes well up. Tomas left the engine running for 10 minutes, monitoring every indicator on the dashboard, listening carefully for any abnormal sounds. Finally, he turned it off and got out. "It's running perfectly," he said with a tired smile. "Tomorrow you should take it for a test drive with a light load to be sure, but the engine is responding exactly as it should." Roberto approached and hugged Tomas tightly. "Son, do you know what this means to us?" "I know perfectly well, Don Roberto," Tomas replied, returning the hug. "That's why I was determined to do it right." Miguel took out his wallet. "It's 3,000 pesos, right?" "Let me go to the ATM tomorrow," Tomas interrupted. "Pay me tomorrow after the test drive, when you're completely sure that everything is working properly." "But it's already settled," Miguel protested. "I want you to be 100% satisfied," Tomas insisted. "Besides, it's late, and you've had a long day. Go get some rest. I'll stay a little longer to clean the tools and make sure everything is in order." Roberto looked at him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. This young man was not only an excellent mechanic, but also a person of strong principles. "Where are you staying, Tomas?" Roberto asked. There was an awkward pause before Tomas replied, "At a boarding house near the bus station. It's cheap and clean." Roberto exchanged a glance with Miguel. They both knew what cheap meant in terms of boarding houses near the bus station. Tiny rooms, hard mattresses, shared bathrooms. "Do you have plans for dinner?" Roberto asked. "I'll buy something on the way to the boarding house," Tomas replied evasively. Roberto shook his head. "No way. You're coming to my house for dinner. My wife Lourdes made pozole, and if you don't bring someone to help eat it, she'll scold me all week for not inviting people over." Tomas started to protest, but Roberto raised a hand. "I won't take no for an answer. Besides, Lourdes will want to meet the young man who finally fixed the truck that had me on the verge of a heart attack." Miguel smiled. "My uncle is right. Besides, my Aunt Lourdes' pozole is legendary. It would be a crime to pass it up." Tomas finally gave in, and Roberto could see the relief on his face. He probably hadn't had a decent home-cooked meal in weeks. As they closed up the shop, Roberto watched Tomas meticulously pack each tool into his backpack. There was something about that young man that reminded him of himself 4 decades ago. The same hunger to prove himself, the same dedication to his craft, the same dignity despite difficult circumstances. Perhaps, Roberto thought, this encounter wasn't just about fixing a truck. Perhaps it was about something bigger. Roberto and Lourdes' house was in a quiet neighborhood, 15 minutes from the workshop. It was a modest 2-story building with light yellow walls and a small front garden where Lourdes grew bougainvilleas that climbed up the entrance gate. Come in," said Roberto as he opened the front door. "Lourdes, we're here, and I've brought a visitor." Lourdes Vega appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on an apron embroidered with flowers. She was a 58-year-old woman, short in stature but with an imposing presence, her hair pulled back in a bun, and a warm smile that immediately made Tomas feel welcome. "So you're the walking miracle," Lourdes said, examining Tomas with piercing eyes. "Roberto called me an hour ago, almost crying with excitement. I haven't seen him like that since our first grandchild was born." Tomas blushed slightly. I just did my job, Mrs. Lourdes, please, and only your job. You saved us from bankruptcy, Ray, so don't be modest. She scolded him kindly as she led him into the dining room. Sit down, sit down. The pozole is almost ready. Miguel, go wash those greasy hands. The dining room was cozy with a large wooden table surrounded by mismatched but comfortable chairs. The walls were decorated with family photographs, weddings, baptisms, graduations, a whole life captured in frames from different eras. Tomas sat down while looking at the photographs with nostalgia. Lourdes, who didn't miss a thing, noticed. Do you have a family, Tomas? My mom in Michoacan, he replied. It's just the two of us. My dad died when I was 14. And brothers, I'm not the only one. Lourdes nodded sympathetically and disappeared into the kitchen. Roberto sat down across from Tomas. Tell me more about your experience at Transporte Gutierrez. How did you become maintenance manager at such a young age? Tomas leaned back in his chair, allowing himself to relax for the first time in months. I started there when I was 19 as a general assistant. Old man Gutierrez, Don Armando, saw that I was interested in learning. They sent me to training courses, first the basics and then specializations in diesel and electronic systems. When I turned 25, the previous maintenance manager retired and Don Armando gave me the opportunity. And did you learn well? Asked Miguel, who had just returned. I learned that maintaining a fleet of trucks isn't just mechanics, Tomas explained. It's logistics, it's management, it's psychology. You have to know when a driver is lying to you about how he handled the vehicle, when a problem is urgent, and when it can wait, how to distribute limited resources to keep everything running. Roberto listened, fascinated. It was exactly the kind of knowledge he had developed over decades, but which his nephew Miguel was still learning. Lourdes returned with a steaming pot of red pozole, followed by deep plates, tostadas, chopped lettuce, radishes, oregano, lemons, and chili sauce. Let's eat before it gets cold, she ordered. The aroma of pozole filled the dining room. Cacahuintle corn, pork, guajillo chili peppers, spices that had been cooking for hours. Tomas felt his stomach growl, reminding him that it had been a long time since he had eaten a real home-cooked meal. Lourdes generously served the dishes, and everyone began to eat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the flavors. It's delicious, Mrs. Lourdes, Tomas said after the first course. My mom makes Michoacan-style green pozole, but this red one is extraordinary. Green, red, white, Lourdes River. Every region has its pride. The important thing is that it's made with love and patience, just like mechanics, Roberto commented. Anyone can learn to change oil or put on brakes, but making a correct diagnosis requires a love for the craft and patience to understand what the engine is saying. Tomas nodded vigorously. Exactly. Engines talk. You just have to know how to listen to every noise, every vibration, every change in the smell of the exhaust. Everything is telling you something. And how did you learn to listen too? Miguel asked with genuine curiosity. Tomas took a piece of toast and spread avocado on it while he organized his thoughts. My father was a tractor mechanic in the countryside. We didn't have manuals or the internet. He learned from his father, who learned from his. I grew up watching my dad diagnose a problem just by the sound the tractor made as it passed by. He said that every machine has its own heart, and when the heart hurts, the whole body reflects it. Your father was a wise man, Roberto said respectfully. He was. Tomas nodded, sadness in his eyes. He died fixing a tractor. The hydraulic jack failed and the tractor fell on him, and he was 42 years old. A respectful silence fell over the table. I'm so sorry, said Lourdes, placing her hand on Tomas's. That was a long time ago. Tomas forced a smile, but that was why he decided to specialize in heavy vehicle mechanics. He wanted to understand exactly what had gone wrong, how to prevent such accidents. He wanted his death to mean something. Roberto felt a lump in his throat. Now he understood why Tomas worked so meticulously, why he checked every connection twice, why he didn't accept shortcuts. Your father would be proud of you, Roberto finally said. I hope so, Tomas replied, although lately I felt like I've disappointed him. 2 months without a chair, living from hotel to hotel, unable to support my mom as I should. Don't talk nonsense, Lourdes scolded him. Losing your job wasn't your fault. Keep looking, keep going, despite the difficulties. That's something to be proud of. Miguel poured himself more pozole before speaking. What are you going to do now, Tomas? After we pay you tomorrow, will you continue looking for work in Guadalajara? Tomas sighed. Honestly, I don't know. The money they pay me tomorrow will get me a few more days here. But if I don't find something stable soon, I'll have to go back to my mom. And that would mean admitting defeat, or it would mean being smart and reorganizing yourself. Roberto contradicted. There's no shame in asking for family help when you need it. I know, Don Roberto, but my mom already has enough to worry about. Her pension barely covers her high blood pressure medication. If I become another mouth to feed, he didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Lords began to clear the empty plates. Tomorrow is another day. For now, let's enjoy dessert. I made flancachero. While Lords disappeared into the kitchen, Roberto studied Tomas carefully. There was something about this young man that inspired confidence. Not only his technical skills, but his character, his ethics, his way of facing adversity without losing his dignity. Tomas, Roberto said slowly, have you thought about setting up on your own? Tomas laughed without humor. With what capital, Don Roberto? Opening a workshop requires tools, space, permits, customers. I barely have enough to pay for another week's board. I'm not talking about opening a workshop, Roberto clarified. I'm talking about working with us. Silence filled the dining room. Miguel stopped eating and looked at his uncle in surprise. Tomas looked confused. But you said you didn't have much work. We don't have much work because we lost customers when we couldn't make deliveries due to the broken down truck, Roberto explained. But with the truck running again, we can get those contracts back. And with a mechanic of your caliber, we could even expand the business. Uncle, Miguel began, but Roberto raised his hand. Listen to me, Miguel. How many times have we lost jobs because we didn't have experience with heavy trucks? How many times have we had to turn down fleet maintenance contracts because we didn't have qualified personnel? Miguel thought about it and nodded slowly. You're right. Last month, before the truck broke down, a moving company asked us if we could service their 5 trucks. We had to say no. Exactly. Roberto turned to Tomas. Look, I can't offer you $1 million salary. The workshop is going through a difficult time, but I can offer you stable work, a percentage of the profits from the jobs you get with your experience, and the opportunity to build something. Tomas looked overwhelmed. Don Roberto, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Lourdes interjected, having returned with the flan. Say yes because these 2 stubborn people need help, even if they're too proud to admit it. Say yes because Guadalajara is a good city to start over. And say yes because I can see in your eyes that you need a home as much as they need your talent. Tomas blinked rapidly, and Roberto could see that he was fighting back tears. It would be an honor to work with you, he finally said in a hoarse voice. But it has to be fair for both sides. I don't want charity. It's not charity, Roberto assured him firmly. It's a business. You bring your knowledge and experience. We bring the space and the contacts. We all win. Miguel extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the team, Tomas. Tomas shook his hand and then Roberto's, feeling dizzy from the turn his life had taken in just a few hours. They spent the rest of the evening eating flan and discussing plans for the workshop. Tomas talked about preventive maintenance, about how they could offer service packages to transportation companies, about the importance of specializing in modern systems without abandoning customers with older vehicles. Roberto listened, fascinated, taking mental notes. Miguel asked intelligent questions. Lourdes watched the scene with a satisfied smile, knowing that her husband had made the right decision. It was almost midnight when Tomas finally looked at his watch. I should leave tomorrow. It's going to be a long day. Wait, said Lourdes. That room we used to store things on the 2nd floor, Roberto. Didn't we clean it out last month? Roberto immediately caught on to the idea. Ah, yes, it's empty now. There's just a bed and a closet and you're losing rent. Lourdes continued, what a waste. Tomas looked at them confused, trying to understand where the conversation was going. Why don't you stay there, Roberto offered directly. Temporarily until you get settled and find something better. We'd only charge you what's fair for utilities. No, I can't accept that, Tomas protested. You've already done too much. Nonsense, said Lourdes. The room is empty. You need a place to stay. And honestly, I like cooking for more than two people. Roberto and Miguel barely eat anything. That's not true, they both protested simultaneously, causing everyone to laugh. After more protests from Tomas and more insistence from the Vegas, an agreement was finally reached. Tomas would stay in the room for 2 months, paying only 1,500 pesos a month, which was practically symbolic while he saved up to get something of his own. Lourdes took Tomas to the second floor to show him the room. It was small but clean, with a single bed, an old but functional wardrobe, and a small table and chair by the window overlooking the garden. It's not much, Lourdes apologized. It's perfect, Tomas said sincerely, thinking of the cramped and noisy room at the boarding house. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lourdes. You can bring your things tomorrow after work, she said. And don't you dare call me Mrs. Lourdes. I'm just Lourdes, or Aunt Lourdes if you prefer, because something tells me you're going to be part of this family, whether you like it or not. When Tomas came downstairs, Roberto and Miguel were waiting for him at the door. See you tomorrow, buddy, said Miguel. Get some rest, son, added Roberto. Tomorrow, your new life begins. As he walked back to the boarding house that night, Tomas looked up at the starry sky of Guadalajara and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Not just a desperate wish for things to get better. In less than 24 hours, he had gone from being a desperate, unemployed man to having a bomb, a temporary family, and a future. Sometimes he thought, life changes in an instant. Sometimes all you need is an opportunity and people willing to believe in you. The early morning arrived cold in Guadalajara with that characteristic fog that covers the city before dawn. Tomas arrived at the workshop at 6 a.m. to find Roberto already there, making coffee in an old coffee maker that was probably the same age as the business. Good morning, Don Roberto, Tomas greeted him. Did you sleep well? Roberto asked, handing him a steaming cup. I thought you'd be here later. Old habits die hard. Tomas smiled at Transportes Gutierrez. The shift started at 5:30 a.m. My body's used to it now. Joaquin arrived shortly after, followed by Miguel around 7. Tomas had spent the first hour meticulously checking the truck, verifying fluid levels, tire pressure, brake system, everything a responsible mechanic checks before a vehicle hits the road. Everything okay? Miguel asked. Perfect, Tomas replied, wiping his hands. The engine is maintaining the correct oil pressure. There are no leaks. The temperature is stable. It's ready for the test drive. Roberto came out of his office with a clipboard. Miguel, you and I will go in the truck with the load to Monterrey. Joaquin will stay and manage the workshop. And Tomas paused. Would you like to come with us? I'd like you to see how the truck performs on the road. Tomas nodded immediately. Of course. Besides, if there are any problems during the trip, I'll be able to diagnose them right away. They spent the next hour loading the truck with the parts they had to deliver to Monterrey, industrial machinery parts weighing almost 8 tons in total. It was exactly the kind of heavy load that would put the repaired engine to the test. At 8:30 a.m., they were ready to go, with Miguel at the wheel, Roberto in the passenger seat, and Tomas in the bunk behind the front seats. Typical of long-haul trucks. The truck started without any problems. Miguel maneuvered it out of the workshop and joined the morning traffic in Guadalajara, which was already starting to get heavy. How does it feel, Roberto asked Miguel. Like new, Miguel replied with a smile. The power is completely restored. Before it broke down, I already felt that it was lacking power, but I thought it was normal wear and tear. The sensor was probably starting to fail some time ago, Tomas explained from the back. We sometimes ignore gradual symptoms until the problem becomes critical. They navigated through the city until they reached the highway. The traffic slowed down and Miguel was able to accelerate. The truck responded perfectly, picking up speed without hesitation or loss of power. Incredible, Roberto murmured, watching the dashboard gauges. Everything was functioning within the normal range. They had been on the road for an hour when they reached a steep incline. Miguel shifted gears and the truck attacked the slope without difficulty, maintaining a constant speed despite the weight of the load. This climb has always been problematic, Miguel commented. Even when the truck was new, he felt it struggled. Have you had the turbocharger checked recently? Tomas asked. Miguel and Roberto exchanged glances. About a year and a half ago, Roberto replied. Why? Because now it's running better than normal, Tomas explained. When we repaired the sensor and wiring, we may have also corrected minor injection problems that were affecting the turbo's performance. In other words, the truck is not only running, but it's running better than before it broke down, concluded Miguel, clearly impressed. They stopped at a gas station halfway to refuel and stretch their legs. While Miguel paid, Roberto and Tomas inspected the truck. No leaks, normal temperature, stable oil pressure, reported Tomas, moving around the vehicle with expert eyes. Don Roberto, this truck still has many good miles ahead of it if it is properly maintained. What kind of maintenance do you recommend? Roberto asked, taking out a small notebook. Tomas sat on the truck's running board and began to detail a comprehensive preventive maintenance plan. Scheduled oil changes, electrical system inspections every 3 months, brake checks every 2 months, transmission fluid analysis. If we establish a strict maintenance schedule, Tomas explained, we can prevent problems before they occur. It's cheaper to replace a hose that looks like it's wearing out than to wait for it to burst on the road. That makes sense, Roberto agreed. But I've never been very organized with those things. I've always waited for something to break down before fixing it. That's the mindset of 90% of small repair shops, Tomas said without criticism in his voice. But it's also why many don't grow. Large customers, commercial fleets, they look for repair shops that can offer guaranteed preventive maintenance. It's cheaper for them than dealing with stranded vehicles. Roberto was silent, processing this information. It made sense. Perfect sense. Miguel returned with refreshments for everyone, and they continued their journey. Over the next few hours, Tomas told them stories from his years at Transporte Gutierrez, trucks stranded in the middle of the mountains, improvised repairs with limited resources, the satisfaction of keeping an entire fleet running against all odds. Once we had a truck that lost its brakes. Coming down the Zacatecas mountain range, the driver recounted, he used the engine to brake in low gears, but he still approached a curve too fast. He veered off the road and got stuck between 2 trees. The truck was intact, the cargo intact, the driver unscathed. I had to go with a tow truck and 2 more mechanics. It took us 2 days to get it out. And what happened to the brakes? Miguel asked, fascinated. Brake fluid contaminated with moisture, Tomas replied. In the heat of the descent, the fluid boiled and lost pressure. After that, I implemented a program to change the brake fluid every 6 months in all vehicles, without exception. Roberto listened to these stories with growing conviction that he had made the right decision in hiring Tomas. Not only did he have technical knowledge, he had invaluable practical experience. They arrived in Monterrey in the middle of the afternoon. The delivery was to an industrial plant on the outskirts of the city. The reception manager, a burly man named Hector, greeted him with visible relief. Finally, he exclaimed, we thought you weren't going to be able to make it. We were starting to look for other suppliers. We had mechanical problems, Roberto admitted. But they've been resolved. Resolved permanently? Hector asked skeptically. Because we need on-time deliveries. If you can't guarantee them, we can. Tomas interrupted, getting out of the truck. We've implemented a preventive maintenance program that ensures our vehicles are always in optimal condition. Hector looked at him with interest. Preventive maintenance program. Most small carriers don't work that way. That's how we differentiate ourselves, Tomas replied confidently. If you need reliable delivery service, we can offer it and we can document all maintenance for your peace of mind. Roberto watched with fascination as Tomas handled the conversation. He wasn't just a mechanic, he had business skills. Interesting. Hector took out a business card. Call me next week. We might have more work for you if you can maintain this level of professionalism. During unloading, Hector approached Roberto. That young man you brought in is new, very new. Roberto smiled, but extremely good. You can tell he has a professional presence. If you work with him, I think we could do good business. The return trip was more relaxed. They no longer had the weight of the load and the pressure of the delivery. The truck practically flew down the highway. Tomas, Roberto said after a long silence, what do you think about expanding the business? In what sense, Tomas asked. Maintenance service for commercial fleets. It's obvious there's demand, and you have the experience to handle it. Miguel interjected from behind the wheel. But we'd need more space, more tools. Maybe hire another mechanic and start up capital, Tomas added. It's not impossible, but it would require careful planning. I have savings, Roberto said slowly. Not much, but something. And with the money from this contract we're fulfilling, plus what they would pay for regular maintenance services, nay could work. Tomas sat up straight, clearly interested. We would need to crunch the numbers, see exactly what equipment we need, how many customers we could realistically serve. Could you make a plan, Roberto asked? Something detailed, with costs and projections. I can try, Tomas replied. At Transportes Gutierrez, I helped with that part too. Budgets, purchase orders, negotiations with suppliers. Miguel Silva was impressed. You're like a complete manager disguised as a mechanic. When you work in a small company, you learn to do everything. Tomas laughed. Don Armando always said that a good maintenance manager has to understand both screws and numbers. They arrived back in Guadalajara around 8 p.m., tired but satisfied. The truck had worked perfectly throughout the trip without the slightest problem. I'd say the test was a resounding success, Miguel declared as they parked in the workshop. Joaquin, who had stayed behind to run the business, greeted them with good news. 3 customers came in asking for maintenance service for trucks. I told them to come back tomorrow when you were here. See? Roberto said to Tomas, the demand is there, we just need to capitalize on it. That night, after closing the workshop, Roberto took Tomas to an ATM and paid him the agreed 3,000 pesos, plus an additional 100. The extra 100 is a bonus, Roberto explained in response to Tomas's protests, for your exceptional work and your business ideas. Good ideas have value. Tomas accepted the money gratefully. It was the first time in 2 months that he had any cash. Thank you, Don Roberto, for everything. Don't thank me yet, Roberto smiled. We're just getting started. Now let's go home. Lourdes has prepared roast beef to celebrate. As they walked to Roberto's car, Tomas felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. He had a place to live, he had people who trusted him, and most importantly, he had a purpose. Not just to fix trucks, but to build something bigger, something lasting. Life, he thought, sometimes surprises you when you least expect it. 3 weeks later, the Hermanos Vega workshop had undergone a remarkable transformation. Not so much physically, although they had painted the walls and better organized the space, but in the atmosphere. There was a new energy, a sense of purpose and direction. Tomas was under a Ford truck from a local soft drink company, performing scheduled maintenance. It was the 5th vehicle in the fleet they were servicing, part of a monthly contract he had personally negotiated. How's it going down there? Asked Miguel, holding a lamp. Almost done, Tomas replied. I'm just adjusting the last connections on the brake system. This truck has another 6 good months, but they're going to need to change the rear brake pads soon. Roberto watched from his office, which now had a new computer. It was an investment that Tomas had insisted was necessary to keep digital maintenance records. At first, Roberto had been resistant. I'm 62 years old, he had protested. I don't understand computers. Then you'll learn, Tomas had replied firmly but respectfully. Or better yet, Miguel can manage the system. But we need digital records if we want to be taken seriously by commercial customers. Tomas had been right when the manager of the soft drink company saw that they could provide him with detailed reports of each service, the complete history of each vehicle, and automatic reminders of upcoming maintenance. He was impressed. Most repair shops give me a handwritten invoice, and that's it. You guys work like professionals. The workshop phone rang. Roberto answered. Workshop, Vega Brothers. Good morning. Yes, we offer preventive maintenance for fleets. How many vehicles? 12 trucks. Of course, we can handle that. When can you come in to discuss the details? Perfect. I'll see you tomorrow at 10. All right, see you later. Roberto hung up with a smile. Another potential customer. A construction company with 12 trucks. Miguel came out from under the truck to hear better. That's great, man. Where are all these customers coming from? Referrals, Roberto replied. The manager of the soft drink company told other business owners about our service. Tomas was right. Word of mouth is the best advertising. Tomas emerged from under the truck, wiping his hands. But we have a problem, he said. If we continue to grow at this rate, we need help. We can't properly service 12 more vehicles with just the 3 of us. Joaquin is good, but he's limited to basic jobs. Are you suggesting we hire another mechanic? Miguel asked. I'm suggesting that we hire someone and train Joaquin properly, Tomas replied. He has potential, he just needs formal training, and we need at least one more mechanic with experience in modern systems. Roberto rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Hiring costs money. Salaries and benefits also cost money, Tomas countered. If we turn down jobs because we don't have the capacity, we're losing income. I crunched the numbers last night. With our current customer flow, we could hire someone else and still increase our profits by 30%. Miguel looked at the papers Tomas spread out on the hood of the truck. They were detailed calculations, income versus expense projections, break-even analyses. You did all this last night? I couldn't sleep, Tomas admitted. I was excited thinking about the possibilities. Roberto came over and studied the numbers. He wasn't an expert in spreadsheets, but he could understand the basics. And the basics told him that Tomas was right. All right, he finally said. Let's find another mechanic, but it has to be someone reliable. I know someone, Tomas said immediately. His name is Raul Torres. He used to work with me at Transportes Gutierrez. He specializes in suspension and brake systems. The last time I spoke to him, he was working at an auto parts shop, but he wasn't happy. They paid him poorly and didn't value his experience. Do you trust him? Roberto asked. With my life, Tomas replied without hesitation. He's meticulous, honest, and an excellent teacher. He could train Joaquin while handling the more complex jobs. Call him, Roberto decided. Invite him to come in for a chat. 2 days later, Raul Torres arrived at the shop. He was a burly 40-year-old man with large hands and a friendly smile. The interview was more like a conversation between friends than a formal hiring process. Tomas has told me wonderful things about you, said Raul. He says this is a place where good work is valued. Here we value skill, honesty, and dedication, Roberto replied. If you have those things, you'll have a place with us. Raul looked around the workshop, noting the organization, the cleanliness, the atmosphere of respect among the workers. When can I start? Raul's addition completely changed the dynamics of the workshop. Now they could handle multiple vehicles simultaneously. Tomas focused on complex diagnostics and customer relations. Raul handled suspensions, brakes, and transmissions. Miguel coordinated everything and learned from both of them. Joaquin, under Raul's tutelage, was flourishing as a mechanic. Lourdes had adopted not only Tomas but also Raul, who had come to Guadalajara alone, leaving his family temporarily in Querétaro until he could get established. Now they both dined regularly at the Vega home. This feels more like an orphanage than a home, Lourdes joked. But everyone knew she loved having a full house. One afternoon, while they were working on the Kenworth truck, now the pride of the shop used for regular deliveries to Monterrey, an unexpected visitor arrived. He was a man in his 50s, dressed in a suit despite the heat, driving a luxury Ram pickup truck. Good afternoon, he greeted them. I'm looking for Roberto Vega. Roberto came out of his office. That's me. How can I help you? The man extended his hand. My name is Germán Sanchez. I'm the operations manager for Distribuidora del Pacifico. We have a fleet of 30 trucks and 15 vans. I've heard that you offer quality preventive maintenance services. Roberto almost choked. 30 cargo trucks. Yes, we offer that service, he replied, trying to sound professional, despite his surprise. I'd like to see your facilities and discuss a possible maintenance contract, Germán said. Our current contract is about to expire, and we're not satisfied with the service. Tomas, who had been listening, quickly approached. We'd be happy to show you around, Mr. Sanchez. I'm Tomas Ruiz, head of maintenance. Over the next hour, Tomas guided Germán through the workshop, explaining their processes, showing him their digital record-keeping system, and introducing the team. Germán asked probing questions, clearly knowledgeable about the business. How would you handle the maintenance of 30 heavy trucks, he asked. That would require considerable resources and careful planning, Tomas admitted. We would need to establish a rotating schedule so as not to overload our facilities. Some services could be done at your own base with a mobile team. For major work, the vehicles would come here in a scheduled order. Mobile team? Germán seemed interested. A van equipped with basic tools and a trained mechanic, Tomas explained. For minor services, oil changes, routine inspections, It's more efficient than moving all the vehicles to the workshop. That's innovative, Germain admitted. Our current supplier never offered anything like that. At the end of the visit, Germain said goodbye with a promise to return in a week with a formal proposal. When he left, Roberto hugged Tomas, 30 trucks. Do you realize what that would mean? It would mean we need to expand, Tomas replied practically. We can't handle that volume in this space. Expand? How? Miguel asked. The empty lot next door, Tomas said. I've been watching it. It's the perfect size. We could rent it, build an extension to the workshop, add more service bays, a proper office, maybe even a waiting area for customers. Roberto thought about it. It was a big gamble, but after 3 weeks of seeing how Tomas had transformed the business, he had learned to trust his vision. I'll talk to the owner of the lot, he decided. Let's see what's possible. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Germán Sanchez returned with a preliminary contract. The terms were favorable, regular preventive maintenance for the entire fleet, with guaranteed monthly payments. It was exactly the kind of stable income they needed to justify the expansion. Roberto negotiated the lease of the neighboring lot. The owner, a retired businessman who had been a friend of his father's, gave him generous terms when he learned that the business was growing. They hired a local builder for the expansion. It wouldn't be anything fancy, basically a metal structure with a concrete floor, but it would double their workspace. During construction, the workshop continued to operate normally. They served their regular customers, fulfilled existing contracts, and planned for the future. One night after a particularly long day, Tomas, Roberto, and Miguel sat outside the workshop with cold beers, watching the construction progress. Sometimes I can't believe this is happening, Miguel said. A month ago, we were desperate, thinking we were going to close. Now we're expanding. Sometimes all you need is the right person at the right time, said Roberto, looking at Tomas. Or the right opportunity, Tomas countered. I'm just a mechanic trying to do his job well. You're much more than that, said Roberto seriously. You're a visionary, a leader, and the best mechanic I've ever known. This business wouldn't be where it is without you. Tomas felt uncomfortable with the praise, but also deeply grateful. This business gave me a chance when no one else did, he replied. I'm just trying to live up to that trust, and you're succeeding. Miguel raised his beer, a toast to the broken-down truck that changed our lives. The three of them laughed and clinked their bottles. Here's to second chances, added Roberto. Here's to building something that lasts, concluded Tomas. 2 months later, the expansion was complete. The workshop now had 6 service bays, an office equipped with computers and a management system, a comfortable waiting area for customers, and even a small coffee shop courtesy of Lourdes, who insisted that customers deserved good coffee while they waited. The contract with the Pacific distributor was in full swing. They had hired 2 more mechanics and a full-time administrator to handle logistics. Joaquin was now a certified mechanic, having completed his training. The Kenworth truck, the same one that had nearly ruined the business, was now used daily for deliveries. It had become a symbol of the shop's resilience. One afternoon, Tomas received a call from his mother in Michoacan. Son, I heard you're doing well in Guadalajara, she said, pride audible in her voice. Yes, Mom, very well, Tomas replied. I found a good place to work, good people. I'm so glad. His mother's voice broke slightly. Your father would be proud. Tomas felt a lump in his throat. Thank you, Mom. How is your health? Better now that I know you're doing well, she replied. I don't worry so much anymore. When she hung up, Tomas sat for a moment looking around the bustling workshop. Mechanics working, customers waiting, the sound of tools and engines that was music to his ears. Roberto approached. Everything okay? Yes, Tomas smiled. Everything is more than fine. I have something to show you, Roberto said, handing him an envelope. Open it. Tomas opened the envelope, confused. Inside were legal documents. He read them twice before understanding what they said. These are partnership papers. I'm offering you 20% of the business, Roberto said. Not as a gift, but in recognition of what you have contributed. Without you, this place would not exist as it is now. You deserve to be more than an employee. You deserve to be a partner. Tomas was speechless. Don Roberto, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not too much. It's only fair. Roberto insisted. I've spoken to Miguel. He agrees. This business is as much yours as it is ours now. Miguel joined them. Besides, someone has to put up with my uncle when he gets stubborn, he joked. Better that there be two of us. Tomas looked at the papers, then at Roberto and Miguel. These two men had given him more than a job. They had given him a family, a purpose, a future. I don't know what to say, his voice broke. Say yes, Roberto smiled, and then we'll celebrate. Lourdes is making mole. That night at the Vega house, they celebrated with a big dinner. Roberto, Lourdes, Miguel, Tomas, Raul, Joaquin, and their families were there. The table was full of food, laughter, and conversation. Lourdes raised her glass. A toast, she said, to family. Not the one you're born into, but the one you choose. Everyone toasted. Tomas looked around the table at these faces that had become so important to him and felt overwhelming gratitude. He had arrived in Guadalajara desperate, without resources, without hope. All he had was his skill and his determination. And that had been enough because sometimes in the darkest moments, all you need is an opportunity. A door that opens when all the others seem closed. A person who is willing to believe in you when you yourself are losing faith. And sometimes, if you are lucky and work hard, that opportunity turns into something much bigger. It becomes a home. It becomes a future. It becomes a story worth telling, Im.